So where was I? I wanted to introduce Jonas. Jonas was so kind to step in on short notice with his webinar that was normally planned for next year. And he's got a very important and current topic. He will speak about the Ecocide Law and the role for the Paris Agreement. This is one of the most important issues of our times. How are we going to keep inside the boundary of the 1.5 degree Paris Agreement? And Ecocide, among others, can play an important role. So from the German side, I just want to add a couple of sentences. The German team of Stop Ecocide, international campaign that is arguing for the introduction of ecocide in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. We as a German team, we have been active for about 2 years now, and we are very pleased that you are here today and share the knowledge and the information with us. We can say that in Germany things are going quite well, because the topic of ecocide has entered the political realm. The new foreign minister, she is thinking along doing a foreign climate strategy, and ecocide is playing a part in that. So the topic is at the heart of German politics at the moment. And some of you might know, at the EU level there are discussions of introducing ecocide in the new European environmental criminal directive. And so these developments are extremely promising and interesting. So we will keep up the work in the next year. And this webinar series is one of the most important things that we are doing at the beginning of the next year. So with this said, I would like to hand over to Jonas. Thanks again for stepping in this short notice, and we are very much looking forward to your interesting talk.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, really. And I heard that many of you that listens are scholars, studying or working at universities and such, and I'm especially happy that you are, and to speak to you. The topic I will talk about is Ecocide Law and how it relates to the Paris Agreement. Let's see. And this is one report we launched about a month ago, perhaps a little less, but about a month ago. It's one report out of 4. So the next report will be about how Ecocide Law helps to get the economy within planetary boundaries. That will be launched in January. We launched a report about artificial intelligence that is really destructive for the planet and for social cohesion and societies, unless you have hard international law that kind of governs it. And so that report was released in May or June last year. And also a report about human rights and Ecocide Law, how they are correlated and how they strengthen each other, the international laws for human rights and Ecocide Law. And this report was funded by the Swedish Postcode Foundation, that get a surplus from selling lottery tickets, selling hope. And so it's kind of nice that they wanted to direct money for Ecocide Law, which really brings about hope. And it was published with End Ecocides Sweden and the Schumacher Institute of the UK. So I think I'll just dive into the topic. For some of you, this could be a long discussion in itself, so I'll be kind of short about it. And I believe there's 1 or 2 of the webinars upcoming that will go more in detail in regards to this. But the Rome Statute is the governing document of the International Criminal Court, and it lists 4 crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression, which is recently added, and the idea is then to add a 5th crime, ecocide, to the Rome Statute. And what it does, the Rome Statute and the crimes there, it complements and strengthens, you could say, other laws. So it's an institutional last resort for the crimes that are listed for the International Criminal Court. They can uphold the rule of law if national courts don't have the capacity or are unable or don't want to, for some reason, to have the court in their country. So that's kind of how it works. So you could say it strengthens in so regard that when the national legal system is unable to uphold the rule of law, the international community through the International Criminal Court can step in and help out, basically. And it lists the most outrageous crimes against humanity or against the population on the planet as a whole. So it establishes a moral baseline. It's really not nice for a person to be even connected to these types of crimes. So the international community, in effect, says that we regard these crimes as abhorrent. Not only that, as something that needs to be sanctioned, that we will sanction. So it's really a strong signal that is established here. And many people that are really skilled when it comes to international collaboration or environmental issues or sustainable development fail, I would say, to understand the difference between hard law, criminal law, and semi-binding agreements. And you put a lot of faith in we had one of the ministers in the Swedish government that said that we have all these compromise documents where we discuss things that we would want to and that we desire to have. We need something that says we need to stop this, and we need to stop it now. And this is what Ecocide Law brings about. I think someone needs to mute. So it's kind of a big difference there. And it, of course, the idea isn't to throw a lot of people into jail, but to change the system and introduce a preemptive reflex. And we have had, if you look back in history, there have been several definitions of ecocide. Was one working definition when the Rome Statute was installed, discussion in the late 90s and the beginning of the year 2000. It is a definition of ecocide that is in effect during wartime, that is watered down, so it's useless in practical terms. Polly Higgins, whom I work with, and many of you in the ecocide movement have met and worked with, she had her definition, and then Greta Thunberg got 100,000 euros, I believe, that she wanted to send into ecocide, and also 2 Swedish parliamentarians asked for a consensus definition. So Stop Ecocide Foundation convened 12 leading experts that made an independent and very strong definition. So I'll just briefly show you that. So as they defined it, it reads like this: for the purpose of this statute, ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. So all these are key words, and they've used words that means and has legal practice behind them from the International Criminal Court in particular. So it needs to be an act, and it needs to be an individual of superior responsibility or impact for these types of damages. They don't need to have happened already, but there needs to be some element of knowledge connected to it. So a pure accident wouldn't be ecocide, and it needs to really to be the worst types of crimes. And it says unlawful because many times people or companies get away with unlawful acts, and really makes business for their competitors hard, because for all the companies that follow the laws, they would be at a disadvantage to those that have found ways to do big damage and get out of the justice system. So ecocide law in the Rome Statute would help with that. And wanton is a kind of, for people that don't have English as a native language, a difficult word. So I pulled out the definition of wanton from this ecocide definition. So they defined almost all the words with paragraphs, but on the wanton paragraph it reads, wanton means reckless disregard for damage which would be clearly excessive in relation to the social and economic benefits anticipated. And ecocide law, as it's defined, doesn't have to be harm that hits humans, but it could be harm that hits the ecosystem. That's also defined. But the wanton paragraph is kind of, I find, very clever, because we have a world that cannot jump straight into fairyland. So we need to have a balance between what is kind of hard to avoid and what is really excessive. So what is really excessive today might be a huge mine that would create huge damage, and that is really not built up to standard and is kind of collapsing at any moment. And if it's kind of, fits the other criteria, that might be ecocide. And then like the same type of operation that follows all the procedures and standards wouldn't be ecocide then. But 10 years or 20 years from now, when technology and practices have evolved, that might be ecocide, because it would be clearly excessive in that point in time. So the wanton paragraphs helps us to progress and keep innovation in a direction that protects the planet. So I didn't want to get stuck with this, but this is a short, about the definition. And when it comes to climate, there is this notion called the climate law, and it says basically that we need to reduce greenhouse gases with 50% by 2030, and basically to zero or net zero by 2050. So it's kind of a big undertaking. The current path is not that direction when it comes to current policies. It's 3.1 to 2.7 degrees warming Celsius, and the pledged path is lower, but not in line actually with the Paris Agreement, which is basically, if you want to keep out of harm's way, you need to follow the carbon law, and that would get you, which is more and more difficult with the 1.5 degree Celsius warming, which is bad enough. And there are several things that will be helpful. So artificial intelligence and technology, and there are reports that go through that, will be helpful if they are governed. A shift to regenerative and circular practices is really helpful, but they need to have more power. And ecocide law will be really helpful to enable and direct the two topics above. And you'll get the slides by mail, and we have their references to almost all the claims we do. And one thing that is kind of troublesome when it comes to climate change, it's not linear. So if you look at tipping points over time, over temperatures here, current warming is about 1.2 degrees Celsius, according to the World Meteorological Organization. The Paris Agreement is a little bit higher than that, and the current policies is even higher. So there are several tipping points that we are getting closer to. So the little dot here is the central estimate, and then the bar is minimum and maximum, kind of according to science. So there are several tipping points that we are not so unlikely to encounter during the next several years, which means that it's really, of course, important. So what ecocide law will do, I will go through that just in a few clicks away. But just put it in perspective, the atmosphere before industrialization really began was 286 parts per million in the atmosphere, CO2. And then, since then, basically up until now, the main additions comes from coal, land use, oil, gas, and cement when it comes to particles of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we would have had a lot worse situation hadn't it been for nature. So the land sinks and the ocean sinks have absorbed more than half of what has been emitted by mankind. So in 2020, it was 411 parts per million. And as you could see, would be in a much worse predicament had it not been for nature. So what the Ecocide Law does is two things. It does protect the ecosystems that already protect the climate and strengthen that protection. And also speeds up the transition away from fossils and destructive practices. And you need to do both. You cannot only have technology to solve climate change. You also need to protect ecosystems, which by themselves needs protection, even regardless of climate, because they are conducive to life on the planet and hence the economy. So both these are needed, and the baseline or the safety rail is missing for those. And one area that kind of makes the point clearer is looking at the deep sea minerals in areas beyond national jurisdiction when it comes to the oceans, where the protection is really poor. And Ecocide Law would be helpful to protect those ecosystems. And as you saw, there are the ecosystems of the oceans are of crucially importance for us. And then one big obstacle to this is the subsidies of fossils. And this graph comes from two sources actually: the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, a research group there, and also the production gap report that has been done by UNEP and Stockholm Environment Institute and others. So if you combine those reports, you have the current plans and projections is the light blue, and the big kind of area would be emissions consistent with 1.5 degrees Celsius up until 2040. And what IMF found is that if you had efficient fuel pricing, stop of subsidies actually, we would get in line very fast with the Paris Agreement. So if you only take away the subsidies, you don't need to put them into renewables even. If you just take them away, you would speed up progress. And the amount of subsidies is equal to the spending gap of the Sustainable Development Goals that would protect the poor and be helpful in many other ways. So Ecocide would be an active support in shifting away from subsidies in many ways. And the most powerful ways are the indirect ways, where those that fund practices that would be ecocidal don't want to fund it. Those that insure it, they wouldn't want to insure it. Those that are involved in the decisions that would or might be ecocidal wouldn't they wouldn't want to be involved either. So there are many indirect ways. So the pressure of subsidies would be lifted. One thing that is many times discussed when it comes to subsidies is that it's important for the poor. But looking at where the benefits from subsidies go, it goes to the richest parts of the population. It's 6 times more benefits going to there. So basically, the subsidization goes to protect the richest parts of the populations in developing countries. So it's a really ineffective way to protect the disadvantaged, subsidies, which is an important thing to know. And when you have subsidies, it's an effective way to hamper the development of the better alternatives. And I should say also that when it comes to renewables, they also need the safety rail. They might also create and are already creating things that I would believe would be considered ecocidal. So the ecocide isn't biased toward fossil or against fossil. It is biased against any practices that is ecocidal. But the capacity is far beyond and consistently beyond expectation of the renewables when it comes to solar, storage, and wind. And Today, fossil are at 80% of the global energy consumption if you combine everything, all the energy types of consumption. And replacement is inevitable. And the investments is shifting really fast, and it's kind of interesting to see the costs are also interestingly very advantageous. So if you, for instance, want to build a new network in Africa, it's by far more inexpensive to do it with solar storage or wind than with gas or fossils or other fossils. So it's kind of a break that we would get help to lift. And the energy market is one market. So the old energy system, if you subsidize that, you hamper the new. And you would have kind of a discontinuation that is more rapid unless you kind of start to lift that break. So in 5 points, what Ecocide Law does, it targets the most serious and wanton acts, and it provides motivation and support for those that work with the most destructive practices or the most wanton acts. Those individuals they would get actually support to shift to better alternatives. Their industry and their global kind of competition would get the same incentive, so they would be able to shift a lot easier. It does protect carbon sinks. It does encourage financial flows towards renewable energy and actually reduce the risk for that. And you would increase the risk for those that kind of dodge the legal system. It levels the international playing field, which is really important for businesses and for making business case. And it prevents harm before it happens. So it's many powerful things. And it's really, the story is even better, but I think you need to read the report. And it could be nice for you that don't know it. It's high on the political agenda. It's more than 25 countries that discuss it. I read yesterday that even the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is a proponent for Ecocide Law. The procedure is quite straightforward and simple, and rather fast. It would, I would guess, be done within 2-3 years when the political will is there. And it's not like climate negotiation where one country could have 1,000 negotiators and 100 countries would share a few, but each country counts as one voice, and there are a lot of climate vulnerable states. So it's really a kind of a power of democracy, the process in itself. So to start to wrap up and prepare time for discussion, I regard Ecocide Law as a very fine gift to leaders. And I'm thinking about the poor leaders going to COP 27 or 28 next year, because people and leaders, they want to keep their commitments. And it would be a lot easier with the backing of a hard law that shifts also those industries stuck in reverse gear. And the many powerful, very knowledgeable people supporting Ecocide, not only Greta, but the president of the International Criminal Court and others. Support is growing. And if you haven't seen the report, the QR code will take you to the report. And you have my mail, and I'm really excited and looking forward to discuss with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Jonas. That was very, very interesting and lots of information in a very short time. So we will write an email afterwards to all participants, and we will send you the slides. Jonas will provide us with the slides, and we will send it to you. We will provide you with a couple of interesting links, for instance, the link where you can find all the reports that Jonas mentioned at the beginning, and a couple of links from us in Germany. Let's open the question round. So if anybody has got a question, please raise your hand. Questions in the chat. That first see if questions immediately from anybody of you. I don't see any at the moment. So let me turn to the chat. There was one interesting question. You talked about the establishment of moral baselines at the beginning. And somebody asked if that has something to do with the law figure of jus cogens. This might be a little bit too detailed for the not lawyers among us, but Jonas, maybe you have an answer immediately for that.
So I cannot go into the jus cogens per se, but there are heads of state or former heads of state also being, trialed. There are business leaders also, being, more or less with arrest warrants coming for them. It's really embarrassing. It's really horrible. If it's like you'd like to change your last name if you're a child to one of those. So even if you do things, within your ethical community, or a community that, the community considers reasonable, it's a strong signal when the international community, declares this as a crime, of this magnitude. So it is a moral baseline. I think, for laypersons, and I should say I'm not a lawyer by training. I've been working with Ecocide Law for 9 years, but I kind of I've been typically advisor to corporations and other things. But I regard it, as, when you have children, and then comes the time when they get a knife, and you really don't want them to take care of the knife so they don't cut themselves deep or cut an artery or something. So then you teach them, how not to use the knife. And what happens then is, of course, that they hopefully won't cut themselves deep, but they're also getting more mindful about how they handle the knife. They're much more mindful of the knife. So you have a kind of a knock-on effect when you say that this is intolerable for the human, and we don't have any environmental crimes at that level. When that was kind of going on, 95, a few countries said that environment isn't that bad, that we should regard it as the high crime, and also human rights and environment isn't really linked so strongly that it makes sense to put it on this level. And you kind of disregard nature, and also, of course, the economic system externalizes it, and you can be really making huge profits by taking advantage with it. So we have legal professors talking about the system of irresponsibility that is a global practice. So the moral baseline goes far beyond. And it's also a last thing is, since it's on individual level, it's kind of your neck that is potentially on the line, or your neck that is potentially being blacklisted, even if you wouldn't be convicted. So it's a kind of different conversation when it comes to the business case. So, okay, we could, if there is a 10% chance that you will have to pay half of the annual revenue in fines, you would discount that and do it anyway. But if it's, I would get in jail if this tailing dam collapse, and so would you. That, you wouldn't want to even go beyond the Excel spreadsheet. So it's that as well. And I guess I didn't at all answer way I wanted, but perhaps some of you, I don't know, Wolf, if you want to expand.
Let me just add something. This question is very important for us as well. I think personally that that the criminal law, besides taking individuals accountable for their actions, and besides shifting money streams, as you said in your presentation, because you can't finance things that are illegal, so finance streams will automatically be redirected. And apart from these two things, I think that criminal law has a very important role in establishing the moral baselines of societies. So it's the criminal law where a society draws the red line, what is acceptable and what is not. And the development of awareness and the moral thinking is like a mirror with criminal law. So it's like a spiral dynamics, you know. At the beginning, a small number of people says a couple of things are morally not acceptable anymore, and more people think that way, and at a certain stage politics will go for it as well and say, well, we can't do certain things anymore, or we can't put people in jail for things anymore that were at former times be punishable. So the moral, when politics change the law and the criminal law, then the things that change in the law are the new baseline for whole of society. Until it's in the law, people will argue. Some will argue in favor of things, and others will argue against things. But at the moment when things are put into criminal law, then it is the new baseline for the whole of society. So this is one reason why criminal law has such an important role to play. I know this is arguable, so some lawyers and professors would not comply with this and would say criminal law is the last resort, and you shouldn't overestimate the role of criminal law. But I think personally that is not true. I think really the moral red line is drawn with criminal law, and as long as we don't have ecocide as a what's the word? Verbrechen. The English word is just not coming to my mind. So as long as we don't
crime,
thanks. Exactly. As long as we haven't ecocide as an international crime, as long we as a societies we go for this and say, well, it's destroying nature is a shame, but we have to do it in order to grow. So only when we really change the law will this thinking change. So with that said, I would like to give the floor to Gisela Toussaint, which actually asked this first question.
Ah, great.
Hello.
Hello.
I want to say a new ecocide law is always difficult, but wouldn't it be very helpful when you point within the international presentation and discussion that this is a quite old law and that has been invented or well, decided from the International Law Commission in 1976 till 1996. It was on their agenda, and a crime within the regulations of state responsibility. They settled this, and then it was illegally thrown out of the agenda while establishing the international crimes. They just didn't abstimmen, das heißt, voted they didn't allow the voting for this crime.
No.
And this is such a fundamental disaster for the whole world that they did that. So I think they are the International Law Commission is now forced to reinvent the whole thing and say, yes, we have made a big mistake, and now we accept ecocide as a crime at once.
Yeah.
Because it's such a disaster for the whole world, what they did at that time.
Yeah.
It was absolutely legal. So they are forced to change it to the good for the sake of the mankind. Can't you take this into your presentation?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I could. We have, yeah, I agree with you. It's and the question is that you get why on earth did they do that? And the notes from Tomcat is cryptic. They're cryptic, and so it's kind of a mystery. What I said in the report, this report is that the arguments they had, the few arguments that kind of surfaced, is totally unreasonable with the knowledge we have today and with the legal practices we already have today. There are very much jurisprudence around destruction of environment and the destruction of human rights, for instance. So the kind of the link is clear. And I guess we can mostly speculate what the reasons were, if it was nuclear arms or something.
Yes, but you can even argue that ecocide as a crime is accepted because it is a sub-crime within war crimes.
Yes.
So it is as a crime, but only for war times.
Yeah.
But okay, so it is a crime at all.
Yes.
You argue like that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as Polly researched it, she said that the suggestion from, I haven't studied it myself, but the suggestion during wartime, the definition of ecocide there, the ECOMOD was size or duration or impact. And then in the last moment, someone changed or to and. So you basically would need to kill the environment 3 times in order for it to be counted as ecocide, which is very hard to prove. And then I think it was with intent as well. But the size, so a point is that even the change of one word could render the definition unuseful, which is what I'm kind of concerned with, and which is why I think the first step is to get the vote to start the process, and then the second thing is to protect the definition, because it's a brilliant definition. So kind of expanding on what you said, but I agree, it's important points, especially psychologically, and it could be added to the slides. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, in our discussions, we always find that people are very interested, and when we say that ecocide actually was in the drafts, and lots of even specialists and lawyers have never heard of this fact. So it's very, very interesting, and well, we can only guess, of course, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was very hard lobbying around this at that moment in time. And certainly our world would look totally different if ecocide would have been entered into the Rome Statute 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So first people are leaving. Let me ask one question, since I don't see any hands up at the moment. Somebody asked in the chat, if the aim isn't to get the people in jail, what should be then be scaring for ecocide makers? And then it says the Statute of Rome doesn't stop any war crimes before they happened. So yeah, of course, that is true. Lots of war crimes are happening, even though they are crimes within the Rome Statute. I would like to point out that that we are dealing with totally different kinds of individuals here. So on the one hand, you've got totally ruthless people like maybe Mr. Putin at the moment, or some kind of warlords somewhere in Rwanda or Afghanistan. So these kind of people really don't care if what stands in the Rome Statute. That's for sure. Even if they do face probability of being prosecuted and put to jail afterwards. But the people that are addressed by the Ecocide Law are totally other people. They do not commit ecocide with intent. It's not what they want to do as warlords. They want to do what they're doing. They want to commit crimes at that moment because they think they've got the right to, or they just have to do it that way well, because their worldview is just like that. So when we are talking of ecocide law, we talk about CEOs and politicians. So totally other kinds of people, and I'm quite sure that they are very much would be very much offended by put in front of a trial. So these people of the tops of Western society mostly, they certainly don't want to be put into jail. So I think it's a very a strong way to stop things before they are done in these circumstances.
If I could expand, I didn't want to interrupt you, but it kind of connects to a question or an objection actually from a minister in Sweden like 7 years ago. She said, well, if we put ecocide law into the Rome Statute, won't it weaken it? They have problems as it is. It's kind of connected to that we don't, it's not so effective. Look at Syria. But so one thing is the individuals, that they won't be deterred by International Criminal Court for many of the war crimes. But also as you were into the rationale and the motif, so it's kind of rational and clever kind of to use legal loopholes unless you have kind of a hard stop. So you have that. But also on the system level, the International Criminal Court, many of the people, I kind of spoke with a lot of people at the side event the same year at the ICC. Many of the experts said, well, actually, ecocide law in the Rome Statute will strengthen it. The Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court is not really constructed well for war crimes. It's not an effective mechanism. And of course, you have the veto aspect. But for economic crimes, it's really effective. And it would strengthen the credibility even of the court. And also since the economy is tying us together so much, even if a country don't ratify it, they would, a war criminal could hide in the US or wherever they live, in a country where they haven't signed it. But with economic crimes, they are dependent on executives coming and going. They could be jailed, and they would the competence they're dependent on selling it to someone, typically outside the country. They're depending on raw materials and tech. They're depending on insurance and financing, and all that is international movement. So it's kind of quite effective, and also it's many times disproportionate. So it's some horrible person sits with a spotless dinner and earns a lot of money of destroying something far away. So you wouldn't. So ecocide law could help to strengthen that aspect. And on the thing about the objective, several of the corporate lawyers I spoke with said that we don't want a law that jails people that really try to do the best thing they can. But we need a law that throws a few people into jail that don't even want to try. So unless people are actually going to jail, it will be too weak to make a difference. But as long as it has teeth, it will change the system. And we want to change the system. That is the objective. So I think that is kind of a nice summary. So the ultimate objective isn't to throw a lot of people in jail. It's kind of changing and making the smart move, aligning self-interest with the interest of the people on planet. That's what we want.
Yeah, it really was a very good point. It could be a very good end point, but there's a hand raised by Mona. I want to give her the opportunity, and then there is one question in the chat that I would like to ask. Mona.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I have one question because I was reading your bio, and you're working a lot with big companies like Ericsson, and yeah, my question would be like, how is the perception in this business world about the Ecocide Law? And because in my perception, it is that all these big companies, at least, oh, sorry, my child is next to me. All these big companies at least are committing ecocide in one point of their supply chains, or yeah, how is the perception in the business world about this law? Thank you, and thank you very much for this great talk. Really, thanks.
Oh, good, thanks. The companies that have an easy path to sign is when the owner is when you have a single owner or a few owners. But for companies that have hired executives, hired board, and a lot of different types of owners, it's kind of a big process, and they need to do they need to talk together. But we've been around several industries, and it's like they're waiting for each other. So on the individual level, it's kind of a no-brainer. When I spoke with companies 7 years ago, for instance, about it, people could say that as an individual, they agree with me. Of course, we should have Ecocide Law, but as a head of marketing for this company, he couldn't agree with me. And I kind of were a bit stunned. And at what moment do you cease to be an individual? But at the same time, 7 years ago, Polly Higgins met when she was in Sweden, one of the largest mining companies in the world, executives there, and they say, we want Ecocide Law because we would like to make green tech, but we couldn't do it without being outcompeted, and then we would have hundreds of thousands of employees and their families without food, and it would be just moved to another country or restarted after we collapsed. But with Ecocide Law, the playing field is level. The competitors in India and other countries, they would have been forced to have this tech we already want to have. And when Valérie Cabanes spoke before 1,000 executives in France prior to the big movement she made in the government, she said that in the end of her speech that with Ecocide Law, it helps you to do the things that you know is right. And if you go to a board that says, well, it's not the most profitable option, we want you to do this, save this cost, shave off these costs. And then the CEO with Ecocide Law in place could say, well, you could fire me. The next CEO will say exactly the same thing. So the board would be on your side. And by saying that, she got 1,000 people to stand up and applaud. And it says something about the desire of the Ecocide Law. So it's kind of, the question is, what would be the lucky company that is a big multinational company that is fastest? And I think it will be a bank or an insurance company that is the fastest, and then the others will come like in a crowd. And we haven't started systematically. We started this year systematically to approach companies and get funding. So we haven't really given it a hard try. But my last point on that is ICGN, which has $70 trillion under management investment. They represent pension funds and the like. $70 trillion. It's like 70% of the world GDP world GDP is 100 trillion. So they have that's kind of the investment. They're the most influential and largest investment kind of conglomerate. They are demanding for the second year in a row governments to put the Ecocide Law, on their priority and drive it in the Rome Statute. It's kind of a big, clear signal. And many investors say that voluntary measurements and classifications won't do it. And there are many of these that comes where ECG and other classification, we need to shift the entire system, also those that don't want to try. So you have, from all walks of life, kind of a real sense of urgency. And it makes sense to start with the worst crimes, not, in a random way to forbid something totally random like consumer plastics or something like nonsense in comparison to ecocide.
Let me maybe just add very current information. The COP15 in Montreal is just coming to an end, and I know that people from Stop Ecocide International have been in talks with the ICGN people that drafted that statement. So this is very interesting, and we will focus on that topic of companies in the next year very much. So there's one raised hand that would be the last one, and then, but before I would like to ask the question from the chat, because it fits here. The question is, could it be a way to address ecocide in trade agreements as well?
Yes. It supersedes like a super law or like an umbrella law. In the report that comes out, actually we probably will have ICGN with us with the launch of the economy report. We discuss how it affects corporate law, how it affects international trade agreements and strengthens national laws. So of course you cannot have a trade agreement where you're mandated to have slaves, but you can have a trade agreement and be sued because you won't give access for a company to destroy a national park. And you have sets of lawyers, making a killing by helping companies to find things that the Canadian government or some other government for sure will say no to, so that they could be sued for a lot of money. So you would have something that cuts through that as well.
Yeah, thanks.
People.
So, since it's now the hour is over, the last question goes to Gisela.
Yes, very short. I met Polly Higgins in 1916 because I wanted to suggest a cooperation, because we had very similar aims to protect the Paris Agreement and nature by using the crimes, the international crimes, the genocide and crimes against humanity, because an alternative, bringing people into living conditions that are able to kill these people, and this is what is happening. Don't implement the Paris Agreement or act massively against it like the fossil industry does. So next to the crime ecocide, there are already two international crimes that could be enforced to push fossil industry to stop emitting more and more CO2 and produce fossil products and so on. But Polly Higgins at those times said she has her path and I have my path, and we should cooperate, but do our things separately. But I think we should cooperate because it's the same goal and a very similar way. I wanted to suggest that we should much more cooperate and support the suggestions from all sides.
I agree. Did you see the paper Kate McIntosh wrote on that, how they strengthen each other, the humor? So I could send that paper. It's kind of interesting how human rights will be easier to defend with ecocide. I know we are running out of time. Just one quick sentence. One thing that you could do, and that is much needed, is consequence analysis. You know, with ecocide law, what will that mean for different things? So I've studied here, of course, the climate and the economy and so on. But think about that. We need fact-based and academic work to show that this is a safe path to walk, because it is. Without ecocide law, we would be thrown into, I would say, 1,000 years of chaos, horrible situation on the planet. And with ecocide law, we might get 3 years of semi-chaos. But that's kind of it's academic work that needs to be done, and steal whatever you can from what's been dug up here. Thank you
very much. Really were good closing remarks, and actually this is exactly what we are trying to do with this webinar series, to go into the academic world. So this is the main focus of our series here. And we are trying to establish even a Congress next year, so maybe that is going to work. So again, to everybody that is still here with us, thank you very much for your interest, and we will provide you with slides and information, and we will invite you automatically to the next webinar that will probably be in January. So yeah, thank you very much. Enjoy the evening and enjoy the festive season, and have a good move into the next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.